Right now, somewhere in your house, there is a piece of glass that knows your face better than most people alive. You glance at it in the morning. You glance at it before you leave. You have seen your own eyes thousands of times. But for over 300,000 years, almost no human being on Earth ever did. Not once. Not clearly. Not really. And the reason why is far stranger than you think. Before you keep going, hit subscribe, because in a few minutes you are going to look at your own reflection differently for the rest of your life. Picture an early human walking beside a river 40,000 years ago. The water is moving. The light is shifting. If they leaned over that river, they might catch a broken, rippling shape staring back. A shadow of a face. Nothing sharp, nothing still. Water lies. It bends light, scatters it, refuses to hold a shape for more than a second. So what did that early human actually see of themselves? Almost nothing. Here is the strange part. Humans are one of the only species on this planet obsessed with identity, with self-image, with how they appear to others. And yet for most of human history, they had no reliable way to check. No mirror, no polished glass, no steady surface at all. You could know your hands. You could know your feet. You could know the shape of your shadow on the ground. But your own face? That belonged to everyone else. Not to you. Psychologist Gordon Gallup Jr. ran a now famous experiment in the 1970s. He placed a mirror in front of chimpanzees and later marked their faces with a spot of dye while they were asleep. When the chimps woke up and saw themselves in the mirror, some of them reached up and touched the mark on their own face, not the glass. That single motion proved something enormous. Self-recognition is not automatic. It has to be learned. It has to be discovered. Now ask yourself this. If a chimpanzee needs a mirror to prove it understands its own reflection, what did it mean for a human being to grow up, live, and die without ever seeing theirs? The earliest known mirrors were not glass at all. They were polished stone, obsidian mostly, a volcanic glass so black it looked like frozen night. Archaeologists working at the ancient settlement of Çatalhöyük, led by researcher Ian Hodder, uncovered polished obsidian discs dated to roughly 6,000 BCE. These were some of the first objects in human history designed specifically to reflect a face. Think about that. For hundreds of thousands of years before this, humans lived, loved, fought, and died without that option existing anywhere on Earth. And even after obsidian mirrors appeared, they were rare, expensive, reserved for the wealthy, the powerful, sometimes the dead, buried alongside bodies in tombs, as if the afterlife required one final look at yourself before you left this world behind. For everyone else, nothing changed for thousands of years. So how did people know what they looked like? The answer is unsettling once you sit with it. They didn't. Not really. A person could describe their child's face in perfect detail, memorize the face of their mother, recognize a stranger from 50 paces away. But their own face existed only as a rumor, something described by others, something imagined, something you had to trust secondhand. Some researchers argue this absence shaped something deeper than appearance. Psychologist Julian Jaynes proposed a controversial but fascinating theory in the 1970s, suggesting that ancient human consciousness itself was structured differently, less focused on an internal, observing self, and more externally driven. Whether or not you accept his full theory, one thing lines up strangely well with it. A species that cannot see itself may not think about itself the same way a species that can. Without a mirror, there is no daily confrontation with your own aging. No morning check of a new wrinkle, a gray hair, a tired look under the eyes. Time moved across an ancient human's face, and they never watched it happen. They only felt it. Isn't that strange? An entire life lived without watching yourself live it. Now think about vanity. Today it is almost impossible to separate identity from appearance. Filters, selfies, Zoom calls where you stare at your own face for an hour straight. But for most of human history, vanity had almost nothing to visually attach itself to. You could still be proud. You could still want to look strong, or beautiful, or fierce in front of others. But you were trusting entirely on their reaction. Their eyes were your mirror. Their approval or their flinch was the only feedback you would ever get. If someone tells you today that you look wonderful and someone else tells you that you look tired, you can walk to a mirror in seconds and decide who was right. An ancient human could not. They lived permanently at the mercy of other people's descriptions of them. By the way, if this idea is messing with your head a little, that means it's working. Drop a comment and tell us the first thing you'd want to know about your own face if you had never seen it. The Egyptians and Mesopotamians were among the first to scale mirror making beyond the elite. Polished copper and bronze discs began appearing around 3000 BCE, catching a dim, coppery version of a person's face, warped, dark, imprecise, but real. Still, these mirrors belonged to nobility, to priests, to the burial goods of pharaohs. A farmer, a hunter, an ordinary laborer in the fields, they lived and died the same way their ancestors had for hundreds of thousands of years before them, faceless to themselves. It was not until glass mirrors backed with silver became widely manufactured centuries later in places like Venice that ordinary people finally began to see themselves with any real clarity. Historians researching the spread of Venetian glassmaking note that even then, mirrors remained luxury items for centuries more, slowly trickling down through wealth and trade routes before becoming a household object at all. Which means, in the full timeline of human existence, spanning roughly 300,000 years since the emergence of Homo sapiens, clear, affordable, everyday mirrors have existed for what amounts to a tiny sliver of time. A blink. If human history were compressed into a single, 24-hour day, mirrors would not appear until the final few minutes before midnight. Sit with that for a second. Almost every human who has ever lived walked this earth without truly knowing their own face. And yet, they built civilizations. They raised children. They fell in love, grieved, celebrated, feared, dreamed, all without the one thing you probably checked before recording this very moment of your life. Maybe that says something about what identity actually is. Maybe you were never meant to know yourself through your reflection at all. Maybe you were only ever meant to know yourself through how you moved through the world and who was standing beside you when you did. Tonight, when you catch your reflection in a window, a phone screen, a bathroom mirror, pause for just 1 second longer than usual. Somewhere behind you, in the depth of time, stand hundreds of thousands of ancestors who never got that chance. They never got to check if they looked okay. They never got to see themselves smile. They only had each other's eyes to tell them who they were. So if you liked stepping into that missing piece of human history today, hit like before you go, and subscribe if you want more truths like this one waiting for you next time. Because the strangest part of being human was never your face. It was always the story other people told about it.